In 11 days, Immortalis and Neovia will make a splash at RAADfest, which is the leading longevity conference. Now, this will be my first time. It'll be your first time, Wallace, right? Cody has been there several times. This is Cody's Friday Night Essence, I believe. So he will be speaking twice, actually, at RAADfest. He'll be speaking at a like a group with Jose himself. Will be in that same group with Cody and a couple other longevity experts. And then Cody will be taking the stage as well on another occasion. I might stand on the stage for just a few minutes to introduce myself. And the reason I would need to introduce myself is these people, for the most part, they don't know who I am, which is, when you think about it, that's quite amazing. For all my life, I've been working toward where we're going now. But it's all been in a secret society. It's been that way by design. I didn't want my focus and efforts to get distorted or off track by the experts, nor did I want to get set back by the authorities. So this is why for the past 45 years, everything I've done has been in our secret society. So this will be my first injecting myself into the longevity field, which will be very interesting. I think it's very important for all of us to really understand what our role is in all of this. I'm there, and our role is to set free those geniuses of society, those scientists, those doctors, and their biotech companies. That's our role. We're there to free them and their research and development, their R&D, from the debilitating overregulation, over-legislation, litigation. We're there to liberate them. That's our role. We need to really understand who we are. I'll say this, we are the missing puzzle piece to the grand puzzle picture of curing aging. We're the missing puzzle piece that needs to snap into place. Because once we snap into place, what are we doing? What is our piece? Our piece is to provide the conditions for the geniuses to soar. That's who we are. Now, that's what I've spent 45 years of my life doing and pursuing. I'll go back and say, starting as a child, listening to my father as he developed Neotech, and then into my journey into Neothink. And those of you who have my 2,800-page book, The Prime Cure, well, you know what my formula is for curing aging. I call it the secret formula, or we can call it the cause and effect formula, or we can call it the supply and demand formula. But you all know my formula. Now, when I began my journey, I really wanted to concentrate initially on curing aging. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to get in and just concentrate on what we need to do. I wanted to meet with the scientists, and I wanted to take that route. But before I ever wrote a single word of Neothink, I quickly learned that it was never going to happen that way. The conditions of society just would never allow it. It would never allow it. That's when I began to realize what the missing piece was, and that I had to fulfill that missing piece, which took me on a long, long journey. I learned that there were two big obstacles, and I created the definitive formula to cure aging. Now, you remember, the first obstacle are the people themselves, stagnant. they lose their desire to live as they get older. Living forever was never a desire or an option. Decades ago when I started, people's eyes would glaze over. I've told you this. I talked to my friends. No, thank you. So I realized we had to get in and remove. I realized the problem was stagnation. And we had to get in and remove the stagnation in most people. And I realized with time and research and reading and talks with my father, talks with my brother, and just deep thinking, that the stagnation came from what the last talk I have on my live speeches on YouTube points out, what I called subtle mysticism. Remember, my father blew up mysticism in a large way, much more so than Ayn Rand had done. But as I got into what was the problem with my buddy, why wouldn't he want to live forever? It blew my mind. Well, I realized it was subtle mysticism. And as I got into this more during my journey, I realized that subtle mysticism, that was the following mode that we've been conditioned to. There's lots of variables that conditioned us into that subtle mysticism. A certain lack of effort, a certain lack of honesty. But, we're trapped in an anti-civilization just as well. We have this cult, I call it, the parasitical elite ruling class, working on us, shaping our minds from childhood. And those of you who have read Julian Jaynes's book, The Origin of Consciousness and the Breakdown of Bicameral Mind, realize we are also, it's in our roots. It's almost hardwired into our brain to follow the voices, the external authorities. And we had to overcome that among the people in order to get the demand high enough to drive all of society, effort, money, focus into the supply, into bringing us the supply of anti-aging or curing aging. So my journey began not because I started out saying, well, I'm going to write business books. And by the way, as my accolades are coming to the forefront now, I am the #1 business self-improvement author of all time when you measure it by proceeds going to the author. And why is that? That's because I never used an outside publisher. I never went to Warner Brothers or any of the big publishers, Simon Schuster or Random House. I realized I could do it myself. So therefore, with that metric, I am the #1 business self-improvement author of all time. Now, I didn't start out saying, I'm going to be a business author. I wasn't even planning on being a writer, period. I just was so driven and intrigued by wanting to cure aging. I was looking at Robert White's research, on Dr. White's research on the transfer of the head onto, a clone body, and what he had done with apes and dogs, and I was drawn to the science. My father was a scientist, and we talked about this, but we both realized that would not get us where we had to go. It was a psychological battle, more than anything else. And the psychological battle started with the average person. That's why my letters reached the average person. I didn't go out to reach the millionaires, which were a big deal 45 years ago. Now it's billionaires, right? But I didn't go out to reach the millionaires. I went out, I was just discussing this with my son Wallace. I went out to reach the average Joe and Jane, because that's where it had to start, with breaking them free from their stagnation trap, breaking them free to live the life they were meant to live, because that wasn't happening. As they got older, the child of the past resigns to the stagnation traps. So this is how I started writing. It was the realization that my friends, my peers, that they were all trapped in the anti-civilization. And the way out was breaking them free of that following mode in their stagnation, which led me to business books, writing, figuring out business. Now, the reason to my business books in self-improvement have sold so dominantly is because it's not a typical business book. It's a psychological transformation in people from the person they are to the person they were meant to be, from the value producer to the value creator. And only when you align with your essence, which is value creation, will you be eternally suited for eternal life. Because you have to die. You have to die with stagnation. I will say people I have talked to, interviewed, associated with, when they're in the anti-civilization, that stagnation trap, as they get older, they accept their death. And not only that, but many of them actually subtly look forward to it. So that was the first big obstacle that had to be overcome, which sent me into my business, my transformation of people's psyche from the following mode into the integrating mode, from the mysticism plague, that subtle mysticism psyche, into the neo-think mentality. And that's why a lot of you have been with me 10, 20, 30 years. And there's a reason for that. I'm not saying, let's double your leads. Call me and I'll teach you how to improve your conversions. I guarantee you'll have 10 million views in the next 3 months. That's not what I'm doing. I am changing the human being. I am breaking the child of the past free, out. That's my secret marketing. That's my, I've told you this. This is my marketing trademark, is I know how to reach the child in the past, because that child of the past is in everyone, save for those who have taken another person's life. Other than that, every person can be, I'll say it, can be saved. The second big obstacle we run into as the demand increases. Now, I have to tell you, the demand has skyrocketed for longevity and anti-aging since I started my journey 45 years ago. Skyrocketed. And we can take a lot of credit for that. The neo-think works, and underneath that, the neo-tech works, have reached millions of people, because for all the 2 million people that I have reached, that's a conservative number, by the way. And when I say reach, I mean purchased an expensive $140 heirloom manuscript, right? So when you pay $140, you're going to read it. You see, there are metrics, statistics of, it's stunning, of people who buy a book. And I don't have those in front of me, but you can look them up. You can ask ChatGPT, and it'll say X percentage will get through past page, well, even open a book. Then it drops much further. A certain percentage will read past page 1. And it gets down to really 99 out of 100 never even read the whole book. They'll read, a few pages, maybe a couple chapters. But I can guarantee you that of 2 million people, 2 million people read my first book. And then of that, I have the highest rating by far of any other author or publisher of those people who read my first book, read my second book, and my third book. That original trilogy of mine, I hold the record in the conversion from the first book to the second book to the third book. So what I'm saying is those 2 million people would be equivalent to, I don't know, tens of millions of people in the ordinary process of going to a bookstore or ordering on Amazon a book. A $9 book versus a $140 book. So we've had and by the way, and the word of mouth too, that I have discovered, much more so than I initially thought, of people talking, as you do, and spreading this knowledge. And of course, passing these down. These were designed to be heirloom manuscripts. For example, Cody got his manuscript from his uncle. Josh got his from his grandfather. You see how this works? It gets passed down. I've been told that people will send their sons my business books instead of sending them to college because they feel that they'll get much further ahead with my business books than they ever would going to college. And that's particularly true today. All right, so that was the first obstacle, stagnation traps. People were caught in not moving forward, and as time goes on, the static gets louder and louder. Child of the past is buried, and they don't desire anti-aging or immortality. They just don't desire it. They may never speak it, but if you probe, that's the case. Now, the second big obstacle, supply. And the supply of anti-aging was so suppressed by the regulations and the legislation and litigation. And not only that, but the ethicists that would shame anyone who, in fact, I remember Hollywood movies used to have these themes about finding the fountain of youth and how, my goodness, you were wrong. It was the wrong thing. You were filled with the idea that was something nefarious to want to live and extend your life. So you had Hollywood doing this. You had politics doing this. You had the influencing class, the media, suppressing everywhere we turned. So at a certain point, I had to go to work on that. Now, in Neotech, my father would hit those points very hard, to the point that we had those, my old-timers here will remember my protection kit and the battles we went through with the government. And that was largely when Neotech was what we call the front end. It caused a lot of battles with what I call now the cult. My father went to prison. I was indicted, and I had to move to Canada just to keep the business alive because they confiscated all our bank accounts. But I began to realize there was another way with Neothink where I could deal with subtle mysticism, not the big, bold, and ugly mysticism that's staring you in the face with the political ruling class. And, my father goes after every external authority with a vengeance. My job, my journey, was to go in and help people break free of these subtle mysticisms that were holding them back within themselves. They just didn't know it. They didn't know any better because you had all these external authorities putting them where they're at in life. And who are they to break through? But my works, and I realized the way to do this was through business. This gave them the tools to break free of specialized thinking into integrated thinking. Gave them the tools to begin leaving behind that mentality from the past that bicameral-like mentality where you are controlled by the external authorities, and you lose your own internal authority. But through integrated thinking as opposed to specialized thinking, you begin developing self-authority because you can figure things out for yourself. You know, when I watch the news, I see through hoaxes even before the expert commentaries do. I would tell my son, it's driving me crazy, Wallace. It's driving me crazy that this is not being pointed out anywhere. And then sometimes, a couple weeks, 2-3 weeks later, somebody will make a integration that will expose the dishonesty, the mysticism, the external authorities trying to control the public. So this second obstacle of freedom, of this over-regulation, over-legislation, over-litigation, the suppression and punishment of biotech companies, biomedical companies, well, that was the second obstacle. And I set off on this 45-year journey to take care of both of these. And the second, well, let me see here. I just got to get myself caught up with my notes. Yep. Yeah, I mentioned people I've talked with look forward to death, actually, at a certain age. It's very sad. But after they get a handle on this neo-think mentality and they move into integrated thinking and onto value creation, that's when they discover or rediscover their child of the past. They discover their essence of value creation. And that's when they are suited to live an eternal life as value creators. So my journey into this second obstacle, first obstacle was business. Then, after spending quite a long time on developing the business breakthroughs, tools and techniques that transform your psyche from followers into self-leaders, then I delved into the second obstacle, and that's the parasitical elite class. And that's when I started, well over a dozen years ago, the 12 Visions Party. That was my entree into dealing with this second obstacle. Because what is my journey? It's to bring the conditions that are going to set free the geniuses of society. Now, what I learned with the 12 Visions Party is something that actually recently caught my eye. I mentioned this to you in a previous talk, in Thomas Paine's Common Sense. Most people, I don't think they would have it would have impacted them the way it impacted me. But when I recently read Common Sense for the umpteenth time, as I was reading, I was saying, wow, that hits me hard. The beginning about, the simplicity of it all under the shade tree, and, you have a few people coming together, figuring out how to run their little new society. And then Thomas Paine goes on to talk about how as society grows, government grows, the complexity grows, and with complexity comes corruption, and how true that is. And I realized that with our attempt with the 12 Visions Party, we were in the quicksand of complexity. And that ultimately led me to where we are now, the path that we're on now, and that is on unlocking a zone, Immortalis and Neovia. There we're in the realm of simplicity. As I said, our Constitution is 111 words, the prime law. And I see this as our absolute route to achieving what we need to do to take care of obstacle number 2, the over-regulations, the over-legislation and litigation that's blocking the supply to rise to the demand, because we all know now that the demand is there. And as I said earlier, we can take a lot of credit in that demand, all of us. We have, if not for Neotech and Neothink and the 45-year history, actually when we go back to the very beginning in 1968, we're talking about a 57-year history with the original DTC technique method, the DTC method, discipline, thought, and control. Well, if not for that, over half a century, you would not see the demand the way it is now. We have a lot to do with that, and we can take a lot of pride in that. Now, it's time for the supply to rise to the demand. We travel around the world. We meet scientists and owners, CEOs of biotech companies, and I'm telling you, one after another, the number one complaint is how they are held back from their research and development. It's the number one complaint. Now remember I told you we have to understand who we are. We are the missing puzzle piece that's going to provide those geniuses, those CEOs of biotech companies, those scientists and doctors. We're going to provide the missing puzzle piece, and that is providing them with the conditions, the place that they can pursue their genius forward movement without being held back. That's who we are. That's what we're doing. And that's what Neovia is going to bring to RAADfest. That's what I'm going to bring to RAADfest. Now, just by the way, Neovia is our American branding of Immortalis. In Europe and probably in Argentina, which will be there in August, we will be sticking with Immortalis for the most likely, sticking with Immortalis. In America, it's going to be Neovia. We're going to provide them with the place and the conditions to cure aging. That's who we are. I will be at RAADfest to let those geniuses know that I am bringing this to them, to liberate them. It will be very interesting, for this will be the first time Mark Hamilton enters the scene, the equation for longevity. I've been in a secret society for 45 years and have never reached out to the public, to the experts, to anyone, to politicians. Now everything's changed. I'm reaching out to the experts. I'm going to RAADfest. I'll be meeting the CEO of biotech companies. I'll be meeting with the Trump administration. It's just, everything's changed. It's like we went past the speed of sound and all the gauges work in reverse now. And it does feel like we've been moving past the speed of sound these past couple of months, by the way. So, Neovia is that missing piece that needs to be snapped into the anti-civilization blocked longevity efforts to complete the puzzle, to open the lid to the sea of you biological immortality. Neovia is the secret weapon to cure aging and death. And now, after 45 years, I will integrate with the geniuses of society to make this happen. That's it for today. As I said, I have to withhold a lot of information at this point in time. You'll have to see it as it happens going forward. It's too sensitive at this point. By the way, I look forward to, some of you are going to RAADfest, so I look forward to meeting those of you. Yes, Lorna, I know you'll be there, and Juanita, and who else is going to be there? Edwin's going to be there. Patricia. By the way, Edwin, Edwin, I just wanted to mention Edwin. See, this is a poker game that I'm engaged in. Edwin picked that up on one of my posts recently. when he was asking, well, wait, what about this type of law you're mentioning? Well, what about the prime law? He said, are you doing this? Yes, Edwin, that's exactly what I'm doing. So there's a lot I have to withhold going into, let's just say, into the political class, okay? There's a lot I will have to withhold, but I am working on the pathway. The pathway. America won't necessarily be our freest zone, but we will get the largest biotech companies here after talking to heads of biotech companies because they want access to the American market. It is the golden goose. And so we will have them and they will move much more rapidly. And as the people fall in love with what we're doing, remember I taught you this, then we could push for more at that point. Once we get this in America, we can almost have our way in other countries. And I'm talking about prime law autonomy. We could surpass, even the great Dubai or Singapore or Hong Kong. So a lot of very interesting things are happening at high speed. I'm going to leave it at that. I just wanted to fill you in a little bit on what's coming up in 11 days. And I look forward to meeting those of you who will be there. By the way, Steve Rapella has told me he's going to fly down, be there as well.
Oh,
so,
no way.
Yeah, so a lot of you will be meeting Steve as well. So looking forward to that, everyone. I'm going to turn this back over to you, Wallace.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you,
Okay.
Dad.
You got
Everyone
it.
put your hands together for this man right here.
Thank you, everyone.